Hello, and welcome to Encounters with Polish Literature, brought to you by the Polish Cultural Institute, New York. I'm David Goldfarb, and I'll be your host. We have another excellent contemporary Polish writer on the program today, Piotr Paziński. He is an editor, essayist, writer, and translator. He studied philosophy at Warsaw University and at the Pardis Institute of Jewish Studies in Jerusalem. In 2005, he defended his PhD thesis about James Joyce's Ulysses at the Institute for Literary Research of the Polish Academy of Sciences. He has published 2 books in Polish on Ulysses, Labyrinth and Trees, Studies on James Joyce's Ulysses, and A Fictitious Travel Guide, Dublin with Ulysses, with 18 imaginary city walks and about 250 biographies of persons mentioned in the novel. In 2009, he published his novella Pensjonat, The Boarding House, shortlisted for the Nike Award and winner of the Paszport Polityki and winner of the European Union Prize for Literature in 2012. In 2013, he published his second volume, Ptasie, ulice, or Bird Streets, a collection of 3 short stories and 1 novella on Jewish collective memory, overshadowed by the Holocaust. And since then, several collections of literary essays. Among other works, he has translated short stories by Shmuel Yosef Agnon from Hebrew, which received a Boy Zelensky Prize for the Best Translation of 2016. He has edited and co-edited books for the Midrash Library and the Osteria Publishing House. And from 1997 to 2019, he edited and co-edited the journal Midrash, the magazine of Polish Jews, which has been a leading intellectual voice for the Jewish revival in Poland that began in the 1990s after the fall of communism. Before we meet today's guest, I'd like to remind you to subscribe if you like our series, click the bell to receive notifications about new episodes, and follow our playlist down in the description below to catch up on past episodes. Piotr Paziński, good to see you here again, and thanks for joining me on Encounters with Polish Literature.
Thank you.
So, I think a lot of people who they think that, that after the war, after the Kielce pogrom, after the anti-Semitic campaign of 1968, that people often say, oh, there are no Jews left in Poland, or no one stayed from before the war. But in your works, you're writing precisely about those people who stayed. And I know that that's part of your own background. So maybe you can, fill people in as a way of, helping people get to know who you are.
Thank you, David. I was born in 1973, so that was 5 years after the March 16th campaign. And I was born in a circle of people, that one may call the remnants of remnants. I'm in the last Polish Jews that stay in Poland out of various reasons. Some of them because we're still devoted communists and wanted to to stay in the place they believed is their homeland, and they believed is their goal, and is their place on earth. And others stayed because of many other reasons, because they have no force, no power to immigrate, because they didn't want to immigrate, because they consider themselves Jewish Polish. And so and these people stayed and made a very small society of extended family. That was my first and still is experience, of growing up in an extended family. No families, because most of the families either perished during the war or immigrated in various, waves of immigration, even before the war and after. And so these people, formed like a circle of friends and cousins, and I grew up as one of, few children there. So, when I got back with my recollections, and was writing The Boarding House, so that was my first fiction. So I traced back all these memories, and I went back, to this mid-70s, beginning of 80s, in communist Poland. That's these people and this group and this circle still existed. And that was important to me because of, very very popular misjudgment and stereotype. There were entirely no Jews in Poland. So that all people left or kept their Jewishness a secret. And when we started Midrash, there was cultural magazine we made for 22 years, from mid-90s to the 2019. So we finished just before, the COVID pandemic.
Did you stop the publication of Midrash because of COVID?
We stopped publication. We decided we have to finish it, because we were tired. We were exhausted of editing. We're exhausted of looking for money. So we decided that was 2019, just before pandemic started. So we were lucky enough to finish all the job before this catastrophe. And during Midrash thing, there were many Americans coming to Poland and asking how about how did you know you were Jewish? There were no Jews in Poland, so and so we started explaining again and again and again that not everyone, emerged out of the closet, and spent his life in hiding. As many people, across the ocean thought, we knew they were Jewish. There was very small groups. They were very active. They were indifferent. They were not religious. They were secular. Communists or non-communists, but the intellectuals, and then Jewishness was everywhere in a way, but maybe it was different Jewishness, it was clearly different that was, used to be before the war, and clearly different. There was in America and Israel, but it still was there, and so I started writing it out of many different reasons, because I went, to trace back to my own childhood, trace back to sources of my own, melancholia. But but one of the key reasons was to depict this group of people,
So how much of let's talk about the boarding house then. So how much of it is, memoir? How much of it is research, and how much of it is fiction? Would you say?
There was no research besides, going into my own memory. Mm-hmm. The only research I did was that I went there. I went there to spend a week in the same building, in the same house. The summer house. 20 miles from Warsaw. That was the only thing I did, and I spent a week there. In a ghost house. That was empty, and it was me and night watchman, and we sat together in a dining room, discussing things and talking, about the past.
So we should say this is in the town of Otwotsk, right?
Yeah, it's clear it's next to Otwotsk. Yeah.
Right. So, and this is because I as a just by coincidence, I happen to be working now on, I'm translating Agata Tushinska's Czarna Torebka, the Black Handbag, which deals with her grandmother, who spent the last years of the war in Otwotsk. So I'm kind of immersed. I feel like I'm immersed in Otwotsk for the moment. And in her book, she says, well, there's hardly any trace of Jewish life in Otwotsk today. Is that how it is?
I think it ended in the 70s, 80s, and the whole area, is now it's becoming more and more modern, and change. And, it's changing all the time. The old buildings are, being torn down, and, and the new structures are built. So there's almost no trace of Jewish life. And there's also no trace of, pre-war life. It's a different place. But to American audience, the Otwotsk served the same purpose of Catskills for New York. There was a place where, the Jews and non-Jews from Warsaw went for summer resorts, to spend, a few weeks or a few months there. It served before the war, and it served after the war, for the last people. And the building, this particular building, I spent my, early years in, served for the Jewish community. before war, and it was reclaimed and still was there, as a Jewish home.
I got the sense from Magata's book that that during the war, basically Christian families, took over the old Jewish boarding houses. Were they how do you know how they were restored as Jewish homes or after the war?
This particular house was in hands of Germans. It's a big place. It's a big place for I think for 15 rooms, or and big dining room, and the other things, facilities. So it served for German army. Then was converted into orphanage, and out of orphanage and Jewish orphanage in 45, and out of orphanage it was reclaimed by joint community. Into Jewish house for Polish community.
Oh.
So it served from the 50s as a Jewish place, as this vacation house, a summer house, a boarding house, what you wish, and until now.
I'm wondering, would you like to read the opening of Boarding House?
Okay, so I read this paragraph twice, once in Polish original, and second time in translation by Tusia Dąbrowska. Na początku były tory kolejowe, w zieleni między niebem a ziemią, ze stacjami jak korale na rzemyku, nanizanymi tak ciasno, że nim pociąg zdążył się na dobre rozpędzić, już musiał zwalniać przed następnym przystankiem. Betonowe perony, wąskie i chybotliwe, wyposażone w drabinki i strome schodki, wyrastały wprost z piasku, jakby je wzniesiono na wydmach. Pawilony stacyjne miały w sobie coś ze staroświeckich kiosków. Wydłużony, wygięty daszek, a na dwóch jego końcach ażurowe litery, które zdawały się unosić w powietrzu. In the beginning there was train tracks, in the greenery between heaven and earth, with stations like beads on a string, placed so close together that even before the train managed to accelerate, it had to slow down in preparation for the following stop. Platforms made of concrete, narrow and shaky, equipped with ladders and steep steps, grew straight out of sand, as though built on dunes. The station's pavilions resembled old-fashioned kiosks, elongated, bent awnings, and azure letters on both ends, which appeared to float on air.
It's something that we've talked about before today, has been your interest in and affinity for Bruno Schulz, who also uses this train journey, at the beginning of Sanatorium under the Sign of the Hourglass, now we generally call it the Hourglass Sanatorium, which is more idiomatic in English. And also, your first story in Bird Streets, starts with a train journey.
A train brings you from one world into another, and also in a literal way. It's not only traveling. It's the same train and the same tracks, with that serve to bring people into camps. So it's a polluted landscape. It's a landscape that it's lost its innocence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it was clear to me after many years, that the landscape lost its innocence because all this, romantic railroad tracks, served, as a part of, machinery of, mass death. So it's like a genocide thing. So it's it's a very complicated. It's at least three in one. And as you may hear, I started writing it, and I started in the first sentence because first sentence, has to be so powerful and to open the narrative. So I use the words in the beginning.
In the beginning, yes.
In the beginning there were railroad tracks, and as it states here, so And in every translation, I had, I think, 13. Some of them, in strange languages. I don't know, like Georgian but in Hungarian. But these languages I knew, and what I told my translator is to keep the first sentence as it states in the Bible, because not at first there were tracks, but in the beginning. Oh, it's a Bible thing. Yeah, I answer yes, that's the Bible thing. It's my book of Genesis, and so I wanted to do it this way. Yeah, and the tracks, and the trees, the pine forest, and the sound of trains going, all over. That resonates both my very romantic and very, pleasant child's memories, and one hand, and on the other hand, it resonates, the trains going to death camps. So it's and the third thing, it really, brings people from imagination to fantasy, from the reality to fantasy.
I also got that sense from that moment when your narrator arrives at the boarding house and comes through the kitchen door. That's the kind of portal to the world of fantasy, like like the wardrobe, like like the this matrix that you pass through, and then all of a sudden you're I guess in the 70s.
I know there's a portal of discovery, and it's portal, of time machine. It serves like a time machine. But on the other hand, there is a reality in this, in this depiction. When I really went there, and that was, yeah, it was 2006, I think. Yeah, and I went there, there was, I think, in October. It was, it was fall, and it was, and and it was empty. I rang a bell, just went here and I have a room rented here. And so I wanted to, to come in, and it's just, I say, who are you? I was coming here, it was 30 years ago. So, okay, are you one of the, yeah, I say yes. Okay, so I cut the discussion and said, okay, let's come in. That was my first moments. I wrote it down. I think in the same day I wrote these words down. On a computer when I saw it in my room. And then I went to have dinner with this night watchman and the director, and and we sat together in a completely empty, warm dining room. It was dark. It was really dark. It was really spooky, and we were started discussing how it was, 30 years ago here in the same place. That was overcrowded. That was Yiddish everywhere, Yiddish or Jewish, Polish, and I wrote it in Jewish Polish. I wanted to sound it, Jewish American in a way, because and Jewish German, which is more difficult. But I told my my German translator use different words. I know it's Yiddish and and German are alike, so they use different words to make it sound a little bizarre, to make it sound little strange. I wanted to have this sense of a strangeness in the language, to make the reader, to just step a bit, and then and think, oh, it's this word sounds strange to me.
I noticed in Bird Streets that sometimes Ursula would, Ursula Phillips in her translation of Bird Streets would get this, like, this kind of expression like, you want, I should, you want I should do that for you? That's a kind of expression that Yiddish speakers would say in English, and sometimes she incorporates that kind of thing. Did you? Well, what is your translator's Tusha Dombrowska's background? Is she an American, or I don't know if I've met her.
She's a Polish American. She lives for many years in New York. She's now in New York. So yeah, and during her years, the English became her first language. American English became her first language. So I think she's stronger in English than Polish. So it's different on me. I think I'm stronger in Polish than English. So that was combining two forces, and we worked together. That was her translation, and it's still her translation. But I gave her a few ideas, and corrected two things. The first sentence, she wanted to translate it at first. No, it's another first, Tusha. It's the first sentence of Jewish Bible, the Bible. So but we use different, words. We're looking for, some old words now. For example, not to use tuberculosis or to be, but use the word consumption to make it sound more, old.
Of the period.
Yeah, of the period. That's a normal thing, what you do when you translate a book.
Some things I thought came through, it gave, sort of a sense of the Jewish ethos of that era. Also in both works that you like, I think this particular dyad, these dyadic characters where you have like two, usually it's two old Jewish men arguing. I think of this as like one of your archetypes. What in your past, where does that come from?
It comes directly from my kids' experience. I was like one kid, there were many, old people. These old people were, it's strange, very interesting. They're interesting characters. There was some funny and some of them very sad. There was sadness, of course. So I think a part of the sadness went into the book. That was the melancholy and sadnesses people, war and camps or evacuation or everything. Bad memories and no families. So they were sad. And they were interesting, they were funny. They want to teach me, these things or the other things. The ones, the devoted ardent communists. So they wanted me to, to go into, the war class. And the other was, was a bit more, it's not religious in a way, in an Orthodox way. But I wanted to give me something, to taste of, of Judaism. So I depicted them as as a twins. The Abram, this more religious, used to be or still is a Zionist, but it's more focused on tradition. And he knows it's over. He knows it's over in Poland, at least in Poland. But but he wants to give me something. It's a trace of the old things, the old books, and the Torah thing. Yeah, the other is still, it's his 90s and still a communist. I remember these guys, clearly, they're friends of my family, the uncles, the aunts, and then they behaved in that way, they behave, are you materialists? Yeah. Okay, I'm materialist. Or do you believe something? I just believe there is I can't remember, that someone asked me, do you believe there is a God, in heaven that created heaven and earth? No, maybe not, but, but there's clearly two types of, people, more traditionally oriented and more communist oriented, at least in Poland. So, there's two types. And so I put myself in the middle, just, I thought it reminded me, it would be funny, to see myself in between these two guys.
And I'm wondering, when you were, experiencing this as a child, I mean, did you have a sense that, this was this like rapidly disappearing world? And did you like hanging around with the, these old people, or did you feel like, oh, these are, you know, these are like old fashioned people, and I'm, like, in the way that children might not be really very interested in what they have to say, or anything like that? Or were you really, really interested in them?
I was interested in them. I liked them, I maybe sometimes, feel a bit restrained with them, maybe sometimes I felt, frightened. I was afraid somewhere was too dark. I remember some dark figures, it was,
Mm-hmm.
these kind of people, you never talk to, and this. And I still remember, the clearly this sense of bitterness. It was a silence and bitterness, and yeah, it was these people were devastated, and by big history, Holocaust and war and everything, that they function in a way, they were big history, building a new Poland and building a new world, and but still there was something very, very sad in them, and I remember this. I felt this sadness. I think I didn't understand. I didn't know, but now I know. But I clearly felt the bitterness of these people, and uh, and that was dark side. And the bright side was I was, a kid, and it was this very interesting, guys and women, and talking to me and asking me to do things and going into discussions. So, when you're 5 or 6 or 7 years old, and you have philosophy discussions on, is the world created, or this world's completely materialistic? It was interesting.
Sometimes, like, I got the sense as I was reading, both of these works, that it's almost, that the what's interesting is almost like the form of the discussion, that it's this form of the argument, and the argument doesn't have to have any content. Like, I know that there was one part at the end of Bird Streets where the two no, it's at the end of the story, the cortege, um, where Stein and Eliezer, they have some argument, but the narrator doesn't know what the argument is. And he just has to say, well, there was some kind of argument, and describe, like, what's happening to those people, and the way that they look, and the way that their body language, and that's enough. You don't need to know any more than that, because it's as if the content was somehow, not as important as just that this is how they were.
Yeah, the funeral scene that was completely imaginary, but still
Mm-hmm.
it comes out of, many funerals I attend.
Right.
But it's important to me because, as you might remember, the main character is myself, maybe, comes from the boarding house, comes to Warsaw to attend a funeral, and is asked to say Kaddish and say a few prayers. And he decided not to. And in the end, he decided not to. It's not to say Kaddish. I'm not a rabbi. I'm not, I'm not the old one. I would become a writer. And so and it was clearly this process of transition from the, I lectured many things. I still lecture many things. How the modern Jewish writing, Hebrew and Yiddish, emerged out of rabbinic tradition, and so that was clearly this point I was into, when writing Bird Streets and the story, he and I asking myself, should we here in Poland, and should we here in somewhere else, should we continue with the rabbinic tradition, or become writers? So I think that the main characters says, that he decides that, he's no longer a religious Jew, or he was not brought up as a religious Jew, but his sense of Jewishness is in, his commending texts, and, adding new layers of tradition, adding new layers of words. And this is my way.
There are these interesting moments, I thought, like for instance in the in the boarding house, where writing is very much about kind of reconstructing and reproducing memory. That Abram is writing down the names of pre-war Jews for what reason we don't know, except to almost just or there are like these scenes where you're introducing new characters, like at the very end of the work, right? So that we know those characters aren't going to develop, but it's as if it's almost like an incantation, that to conjure those figures that that might not otherwise be remembered.
One of the artists that has big massive influence on me was Tadeusz Kantor and his Dead Class, and so say the Dead Class and bring the dead again and again, like happens in a good theater, this the bring them back for a while, bring life to these people that are no longer here, and it's not a ghost thing. It's not, it's not sitting, over the table, and asking, ghosts to come. But
it's not a seance.
It's not a seance, it's
Yeah.
not a seance. It's something, it's a different thing. I think it's standing somewhere between these two worlds, and I experienced that, in this empty dining room, I felt, the presence of these people, and the ghosts, but they were here, they were there, and here and there, one in the same level, in the same platform, and this. And just, yeah, it was spatial and temporary thing, those all in one, and for a short while, a very short moment, and and out of these short moments, like epiphany, that comes, the writing.
Yeah, I'm looking at my notes in the in the margins of the boarding house, and they're these spots, like this is the end of chapter 6, this last paragraph, and it seems like where again you've like introduced this series of characters who just appear for a moment, who don't come back, and then you say which of them survived, taken in by good people, or because there was not enough room on the train, or for some other unfathomable reason, for example, thanks to an intervention from our indolent creator who could no longer tolerate the butchery and decided to act, or due to a failure on the devil's part, who, for fun or worried about his own well-being, left a few souls in the world as a souvenir. Or maybe it was just a coincidence of events that allowed a few to walk out, to bear witness, to scream and lament, to never forget, or to forget forever and yet to remember, from generation to generation, till the end, till the last breath, or maybe even just one day longer. That's about all that is left of this old world. And I thought that, well, maybe that's the Kaddish, I mean, that's
Thank
the
you.
that's like the memorialization of all those names who appear in one photograph, or in just in a memory that's that's going to be lost otherwise.
Maybe you're right. Maybe it's between us and them, and we don't need candles, we don't need prayers. We just need, memory and writing. I can't remember now. It's 15 years, but
Yeah.
it's so I'm adding a new layer of
Mm-hmm.
of memory. How did I write it? So it's but I think I think you're right. I was thinking, saying Kaddish in my own way.
Another kind of, Schultz, Bruno Schultz motif that, that you use a lot is, his images of or your images of the birds. I mean, that's, kind of a central thing for Schultz, and it seems for you too. I mean, all these, the old bird-like men and who are, like crows arguing with each other. The beak-nosed old men coalesce into a single figure. You're talking about Dr. Khan and Pan Yakub, Mr. Yakub. And you said, at the end of their lives, Jews come to resemble birds, as if they were seeking to fly away with the last effort of their muscles, which is both, something that sounds like, like Father's last escape from Schultz, and maybe Itzik Manger's famous poem, in Der Weg steht a Bäum, right? That where he's a child and imagines that there's a tree outside, and that it's filled with birds, and that the birds have the chance to fly away because he has an overprotective mother, and this is their way out, and it follows them all through life.
How about Malamutes? The Joubert, and this is the thing. Yeah, and there's a fourth factor, which is you didn't mention. So the streets. Mm-hmm. The names of the streets of Warsaw, this part of Warsaw, there's, that was given, the street names very simple, this northern part of Warsaw, that was a Jewish neighborhood there, and there was a ghetto there, and still exists in a virtual way. The names are very simple, like Cold Street and Hot Street, like and like Brick Street and Clay Street, and many streets are bird streets, Crow Streets, the Pickett Street, and many others, Goose Street. The Goose Street was one of the most important. That was Fifth Avenue, of the Jewish Warsaw. It was like a Broadway. It came from the very center of the town out to the cemetery. So the cemetery was sort of the Goose Street Cemetery. So the bird streets are this still is the reality of the town. So I imagine myself, these people as birds, coming back in the bird streets, and resettling in their own environment. And that is the story of non-existing town. The ghost town. It's not a ghost town. It's non-existing town. It's town that was completely destroyed and is rebuilt. So it does resemble, the pre-war town. So when you walk there, you have to force your imagination, to work very, very hard, to grasp some things from the pre-war Warsaw, and it's tricky. It requires a very focused thinking, and you have to precise. You have to be very precise. You have to force your imagination to work, and have to know how it looked like. And we have a lot of maps. We have a lot of photographs. And it's still an obsession. It was obsession for many people, the phone book. For Paul Auster, that recently passed away, it was one of his obsession. This underground Warsaw with his own telephone book, that serves. There is no purpose for her,
So Bird Streets did have research then.
I did some research, and I did some research in my memory, or in the reality. I set on maps. I just work with. I was setting up. For example, which street were, and
because it seemed like that, in the cortege and the funeral procession, that there, you'd sort of move from writing about, your, more like, personal history and memoir to, something more like, something more abstract, something more like, maybe like Kafka, more like something more like, with many of the same, with of course all the same, literary influences, but it's this is a kind of surreal environment. People wandering through a labyrinth like cemetery, wandering Jews in a cemetery.
yeah, it's also a desert, from a book of Exodus, I think. Wandering is interesting. It's important because I never believe in a permanent settlement in one place, because many of these people wander. And it's not a big Jewish history for 3,000 years, but it's also family history. People moved from one place into another and lost their entire world, and escaped and came back and then immigrated. So it's all this, this world is moving, is and it's wandering. So I think in wandering is one of the key factors of the Jewish condition, writing and wondering, like and halacha and haggadah, this is walking and talking. This is what I tell my students, all the time. Halacha and haggadah is walking and talking. And it's combination of these two that gives you the entire rabbinic Judaism.
There's a moment when Abram reflects on assimilation and the phenomenon of assimilation. And this is one of the sort of arguments that he has with Leon in the boarding house. I have to wonder, I guess, about for these people who stayed, for these people who saw the world, kind of the Jewish world, receding, like what that meant, and then the fact that that generation, most of them died before, this recent phenomenon of Jewish revivalism, people rediscovering, that they were Jewish, and things like that. And so then now you have this, this de-assimilation, or people who had become thoroughly assimilated becoming unassimilated. What's that discourse like?
It was full of ambivalence, as I remember them, in the 90s, for example. There was the ambivalence, came out from two directions, but I think were full of pride and envy in the same time, Why? Because of pride, okay, you're just continue your things, we started or we inherited, it's a normal chain of generations. So there's a sense of pride. I was just started, learning Hebrew. Okay, it's Spanish, Yiddish that no one of them gave us, because they decided to stop. They decided, to cut ties with the old world. So, and there was a sense of envy. I think it clearly sounds in the end of this book, it's ours and it's not yours. And we are the last ones. We are the last generation, and you are the usurper. So I think, you can feel two opposite things in the same time. So I think they felt that way. They felt that they are the last ones, and this feels pride that we continue. So and I think it never settled down with these two feelings. They passed away with this ambivalence.
Hmm.
Want the last ones, or do we want to see our children or grandchildren, especially grandchildren, to go on?
This paragraph really jumped out to me, or the section where, who's speaking here? Is this Jakub? He says, holiday makers in the spring, he said loudly. Don't worry, they won't arrive too fast. They are still young. What would they come here for? But wait a little, and you'll see. The director looked at him surprised. What is he saying? An optimist on call. A friend to youth, an old fool. He has not gotten any smarter with age. Nearing his death, he began to believe in a bright future, or maybe nobody got smarter. None of us. How many millions of us? Our empty place stands firm outside, where at night the stars do not shine. The young will come, he drawled out. Fine, let them be. Let them not go anywhere. They will stay. They won't be Jews. Why would they be? Mr. Jakub wiped his half-closed eyes with his hands. The young ones will turn old. It's more than certain. And then they will return to you. He was convinced of it. When they get old, not much will be left of them, just skin and bones, not counting worries, the director observed. That ambivalence is there. Do you think that that's, of any, there's so few survivors left, but do you think they the survivors, Holocaust survivors in Poland still feel that ambivalence, 20 years later, 30 years later?
I think this ambivalence is fundamental for the Jewish experience for the last 3,000 years.
Yeah.
Out of Egypt, why would you leave Egypt? Why would you leave Egypt? So we know the Midrash that 2/3 of Egyptian Jews stay. So it's only 1/3 that came out of with Moses. So yeah, I think it's the old story. Should I stay or should I go? And should I go on or should I stop? No, it's a very long story. It's ongoing factor of Jewish history or Jewish historical experience, what you wish, and then today, I think a Jewish revival, as it was in the 90s or next decade, it's over. It's completely different. People went to various directions, and the world is different. The Jewish experience is different. The needs are different. So everything is different. And the old generation, they passed away. So there's no people. There's almost no pre-war, as we call them, pre-war Jews. And does that mean that it's over? No, it's never over. No. So it's different. These people, try to keep the traditional identity in the way that probably the old generation might not have accepted, but it's a normal thing. By the way, the house is closed. This house closed down 2 years ago. It served for the refugees from Ukraine for a couple of months and then closed down. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm afraid it has closed for forever, So this is the end of the story, 15 years after my book.
What are you working on next? I mean, you've published like a number of collections of literary essays, and do you have more fiction projects going on?
Not particularly. I think I became more and more essay oriented, what you call essay prose, or I don't know. It's a difficult thing, It's complicated, but it's not fiction. I finished a few books on nonfiction, but now I'm going to direction to write a few other pieces on. I still don't know what about, and I think will be more essay than regular fiction with dialogues and characters. So, yeah, maybe this this story is over. I don't know. Maybe one day I will start new fiction.
Maybe it'll come
This
back.
fiction is based, on my experience. I never invented stories, so it's. And I think I have, problems with inventing stories. It's not entirely invented. It's based on true fact, based on true stories. I'm not the type of writer, that's sits down in front of a computer or that takes the pen and starts writing. It's inventing characters and story.
I thought that that the cortege was something that was kind of very much out of the imagination.
Invented.
So you've got it, I think.
Thank you.
So
but take Schultz. It's 200 pages.
Yeah.
And I think it's enough. You're not producer of vast volumes.
Maybe there's another 200 pages of Schultz that we haven't found yet, but that's always
still 400.
That's always the mystery. But what that raises an interesting question. I mean, I was thinking about this, this affinity for Schultz that you have, and that I've written about writers who have an interest in Schultz, and there seems to be two kind of distinct groups. I mean, one is people who are fascinated by Schultz's life, really, and and then Schultz becomes like kind of a character in their work, and this is true for Philip Roth in the Zuckerman trilogy. This is Cynthia Ozick in The Messiah of Stockholm, and David Grossman in Sea Under Love, and in there's yet another bizarre thing going on in Jonathan Safran Foer's Tree of Codes, and then there are the writers who I think you are in the group that has like a kind of affinity for Schultz's writing, and for his use of movement between myth and reality. That I think you can find we could find in Bird Streets and in the Boarding House, but also in Danilo Kish, Yuri Androchovich, people who are like kind of deeply involved in Schultz as a writer for what he is, and not distracted by this story of what the Nazis did to Schultz. I mean that's and I think that's profound and something to go with, something to develop.
I know the biography, but I was never that interested in developing a biography or like research or a writer.
Right.
And Schultz serves me as a time machine. I was looking for some literary text, that served me as a time machine, as both time machine and a dark glass. And I see, that world through the dark glass of, a dim glass of Schultz prose. And he died in the Holocaust, but he wrote his things before, and this is important because sometimes he serves as a particular exemplary Holocaust writer because some people misunderstood and misunderstand that he wrote this fiction before. It's not a fiction about the end of this world. It's about the atmosphere in this world. It's about many different things, about the love and death, but it's clearly not about Holocaust. And I'm deeply against it, just looking at Schultz as a Holocaust writer. But still, when you read his world, you read it through the dim glass of what happened. It's unavoidable, thing. It's just when you take the railroad things, when it serves and Schultz and Grabinski and other people and Dickens as a way of of moving from one world into another, from the reality to fantasy, as you told. as you say. But there's an additional layer, of the genocide. So you cannot escape that. And I'm going to say, oh, it's a romantic thing, and the railroad is the only way, from traveling and and moving from one world to another. That was a way of moving from one world to another, from the ghetto to the death camp. So it's especially here in what I'm saying, so it's and especially this railroad tracks, when I remember, this that served this purpose. So the summer house was 3 miles from the place where in August 42, all these Jews of Auschwitz were gathered in one place and put into the cars and driven to Treblinka. It took 2 hours to annihilate them. So it's a thing we have to remember. The same goes with Schultz. It's but it also serves as a time machine. So it's very good in space and time travel. I think it's not the only one, but I stole many things from many different authors.
Are any of the essays going to be translated?
I wrote a book on mannequins and on dummies, and wax figures in 19th century European culture. There was,
this one, right?
Yeah, this one. The fake realities. The fake realities. There was, was a very popular attraction from London to New York, from Paris, to Vienna, and I was. Every big town or every small town has its own, wax figure cabinet, and it was a very popular thing to make how to deal with artificial life. That was what interested me.
Maybe we'll start with maybe one essay or one chapter.
Okay, with pleasure.
See if we can find somebody who might be interested in that.
Okay.
Because it looks very interesting. I got it recently because if I order books from Poland, I tend to order things that I think I might be interested in, even if I don't need them immediately, because it will take too long to order them later when I really do need them. So that's one of the books I have on my shelf waiting to be read and studied. But well, thanks so much for joining me on the program, and I hope we have another opportunity.
Thank you.
Don't go away. Please subscribe and click the bell to stay on top of the program. Watch the credits for some recommendations about how you can support aid for Ukraine and for Ukrainians fleeing the war in their country. I'd like to thank all the people who helped make this series possible. The Polish Cultural Institute New York sponsors our program. Bartek Remisko, head of humanities and literature at the Polish Cultural Institute New York, is our executive producer. Natalia Iyudin is my fellow producer and editor. Our opening and closing music is by Radek Przedpełski. Thank you all for listening and reading along with us. We're a little unsure about the order of the next few episodes, given the availability of guests and such, but check the schedule on the Polish Cultural Institute New York's website, linked in the description below. And I'll look forward to seeing you again in a month when we'll be discussing another fascinating topic in Polish literature. See you then.
Jest to szary dzień, jak zawsze w tej okolicy. Cała sceneria wydaje się chwilami fotografią z ilustrowanej gazety. Tak szare, tak płaskie są domy, ludzie i pojazdy.